Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel where we unpack the truth behind the headlines, dissect the narrative, and give you the bold takes others are too afraid to say out loud. Today we are diving into a heavy and highly charged topic that is stirring up global attention, and it all starts with South Africa's Freedom Day and what freedom really means for some of its people. 31 years after Apartheid ended. On one side, a white South African man shares his raw, unfiltered perspective on feeling economically, socially, and politically trapped, claiming that corruption, race-based legislation, and systemic marginalization have turned freedom into a mess for his community. On the other side, a passionate rebuttal comes from across the ocean, pointing the finger at historical land theft, racial privilege, and justice long delayed. They are calling out the Trump administration for welcoming whites South African refugees while actively deporting black and brown immigrants from US soil. One side says it's racial injustice, the other side is long overdue justice, two truths or two completely different versions of reality. We will break down the facts, explore both perspectives, and look at how this explosive issue of race, land, and legacy is being debated not just in South Africa but across the globe. So grab your coffee, buckle in, and get ready for an unfiltered conversation that goes for deeper than the headlines. Don't forget to like, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe for more real talk, real voices, and real impacts.
Man, so he just flew them South Africans in, and y'all bitch ass ain't gonna do a motherfucking thing about it. Yeah, he finna get their ass all this free ass money. He finna get their ass free healthcare, free phones. He finna probably drop 100,000, 30,000 in them folks' account, and y'all ain't finna do nothing. He kicking all the brown folks out. He flying all these motherfucking white South Africans in, and y'all bitches don't sit up there and don't do nothing. Don't nobody say nothing. Ain't nobody posting shit about this motherfucker. He killing us in the streets, and he bringing these folks in y'all face. Y'all want to keep screaming all this Donald Trump pussy ass shit, talking about man about racism. Man, it's about racism, nigga. Nobody gives a fuck about y'all, man. So we gonna pick a side too. Fuck y'all. You know what I'm saying? And to you motherfucking South Africans who think you finna come to America and think it's finna be cool for you, get my motherfucking face, man. You think we gonna let y'all live like... Fuck out of here, stupid.
Trump saved white South Afrikaners from genocide in South Africa.
What genocide?
He said that white South Afrikaners were subject to racial genocide. So he flew out a jet and brought them here to America for free. Now they're being celebrated.
This actually happened to all farmers regardless of race. And you know that before 1994...
What about apartheid?
White South Africans that were part of apartheid held all the political power and the wealth in South Africa.
But I thought they were being discriminated against and had opportunities held from them. You're telling me they're the wealthiest still and own most of the land?
But the only people talking about this white genocide happening in South Africa is white Americans, not actual South Africans living there.
But I was told apartheid was black racism to oppress the white South Africans and give them a poor situation.
This was a preferred situation in which the rich, wealthy elite of white South Africans were only hiring other white South Africans and chose apartheid because they didn't want anything to do with the actual Africans out there.
Are you saying black South Africans actually protested against apartheid? You're really going to sit here and defend all of that?
No, because you're describing them how black people are treated in America essentially as if it's the same situation out there.
Look.
What's out here is not out there. I also...
Trump just released a video welcoming the white South Africans, saying these immigrants will fit right in. I can't wait till they're my neighbors and I can say hello.
So we're hard on brown immigrants, colored immigrants, whatever type of colored immigrants. But if the second they're white immigrants, we personally fly out a jet for free to bring them over here. No green card. They don't got to pay a dime. And then we celebrate them and say they're going to easily assimilate and they'll blend right in.
Yes, because this time I know they're good people. Something just tells me. Others were criminal.
You're buying all this black and brown fear the media is spoon feeding you because you think Trump isn't the media. Surprise, he bought the media. He is the media now.
If he's the media, then how come he's the only source of truth I receive? I think the news is designed to keep me fearful and distracted.
Because while you're so worried about this stupid situation, you can't even fathom that you're being pickpocketed by the same person giving you these irrational fears on a country you never been to from news you've never heard of.
This just goes further to show that people from Israel, the Middle East, Mexico, Africa, and all other countries are violent except for the ones that look like I am superior.
Where do you get this information?
It's too late. Congratulations to my new neighbors 2025.
So today is National Freedom Day here in South Africa, and I want to talk about what it means for me, a white male, who straddled the years of apartheid prior to 1994 and post 1994, 31 years of the rule of the new dispensation, the tripartite structure here in South Africa, the link between the ANC, COSATU, and the South African Communist Party. There's no doubt in my mind that we are not a free country. We are absolutely captured by corruption. We are absolutely captured by crime. And we are captured by a lack of political will of our politicians and the enforcement agencies in South Africa to do the right thing. They go after low-hanging fruit of people who are able to comply, do their tax returns, live by the laws of the land, but they get traffic fines and maybe they're late on their VAT payments, etc. It's much easier to go after white people in South Africa and therefore restrict the freedoms of white people in South Africa vis-a-vis black people in South Africa than it is to actually be pervasive among 70 million people. Because in effect, you're going after 4.5 million people, much easier to enforce the law with 4.5 million people. So for that reason, white people in South Africa are simply not free. Legislatively, we have 142 pieces of legislation in the country that prohibits white people from having parity with black people. That means white people cannot get the jobs. That means white people cannot get promotion. That means white people cannot live as freely as black people in South Africa. And the only thing that keeps white people floating are their capital reserves, in other words, the money that they've managed to save, and most probably good jobs for those people who are employed, but no new white people becoming employed simply because of that 142 pieces of legislation. As white people who own businesses in South Africa, the compliance requirements are ridiculously prohibitive, essentially stopping white people from having access to any supply-side funding to create new businesses, to grow their businesses, etc., unless they're prepared to take personal loans out from banking institutions, sign surety, sign over their homes, etc., etc. So economically, white people are captive here in South Africa. Socially, white people are absolutely captive in South Africa and are meant to be second-class citizens because that's redress of people who either lived under apartheid or, in fact, people who have been born after 1994 but believe they know what freedom actually means, when, in fact, they've got no cooking clue as to what freedom means. Now, those of us who fought under apartheid and fought against apartheid will tell you that we question what we were fighting for. Did we fight for the freedom of all South Africans to live under something called Ubuntu, which just doesn't exist? Because if we did, then we were absolutely under an illusion that would never ever come true in our lifetimes. Or did we fight for our children to have rights here in South Africa of parity and equality? Because if so, we were absolutely under an illusion, and that's never going to happen here in South Africa. So if we ask, what does Freedom Day mean to us? To me, as a white person in South Africa, it means that we are imprisoned by an economy that treats us as a second-class citizen, by a job market that not only treats us as a second-class citizen, but absolutely marginalizes white people here in South Africa, by a society that takes joy in being anti-white and racist here in South Africa. We are threatened by 142 pieces of employment legislation, of business legislation that absolutely discriminates against white businesses and white people generally in South Africa. And we are threatened by crime, which is absolutely rampant. It is something like 8 times higher than the death rate in Gaza on an annual basis. And we are threatened by absolute corruption. My final thought on freedom is that we got it wrong in South Africa with BBBEE, not because it wasn't the same plan that the Afrikaans Nationalist Party put in place after 1912 and 1914 here in South Africa to actually grow the entire community of Afrikaners into self-reliance, but because what BBBEE did is it created not a communal or a collective benefit for all black people in South Africa, but personal benefit for those people who were able to corrupt the country and corrupt income and corrupt legislation in the country to their own personal benefit and their very, very narrow circle of friends, rather than the black community as a whole. So there is no freedom here in South Africa, and do not pretend there is freedom in South Africa. If you're a black person, the majority of black people have it worse off than before 1994. And I don't care who wants to take issue with me on this issue. Just ask those people who straddled, like myself, pre-1994 and post-1994 to actually know the truth, if you're prepared to listen to the truth. And the majority of people born after 1994 are simply not prepared to listen to the truth, to facts here in South Africa.
In the event that this piece of information has not been made available to you or you just don't know, I'm here to inform you that this Sunday, the Trump administration is set to receive a group of South African refugees. These are white South African refugees, okay? This group is going to comprise or consist of 49 people coming in from Johannesburg. They will be boarding a private jet, landing in Texas, where they will then be transported to their new homes. You mean to tell me that the same administration that has been going out of its way to deport the brown and black migrants that we currently have here in America, to the point where they are bribing people to self-deport with the incentives of getting $1,000, okay? They're making sure that they are deporting our migrants without due process. Okay, they're not even making sure that any of these people are actual criminals, going out of its way to deport the already existent migrants that are here in America, only for them to show us that we've always been accepting to migrants. They just gotta be, you understand? They gotta be the color that we want. You know what's the really funny part is that Trump and the administration is stating that these individuals, these white South African refugees, are dealing with racial injustice and discrimination. And that's the reason why they're opening America, you know, to them. Do you want to know what is the racial discrimination and injustice that these white South African refugees are claiming? It's black South Africans fighting and claiming their land back. That's the racial discrimination. That's the racial injustice. The fact that the black people are claiming their land back. Let me give y'all a quick little history lesson. So during colonialism and the apartheid, right, the white settlers were able to come in and nearly take over all of the land in South Africa. By force, by the way. I want to make it clear. By force. Even at the end of apartheid, which ended in 1994, a population, a group of people that made up less than 10% of South Africa's population owned nearly 70% of its land. You know what that meant for the black South Africans? They were pushed into poverty, okay? They were pushed into barren land. They were denied the right to buying and owning property. So land reform was always the goal. That was always the goal. Although every time they made the attempts to move into that direction, things were blocking it. I know you know what I'm talking about. So now politicians and movements are demanding for what they call land expropriation. Yes, land expropriation without compensation. Basically meaning you will return this land to its rightful owner and we will not pay you for that. You should have never had it to begin with. We're not giving you any type of compensation for the land that you should have never had to begin with. I understand back in your day, you guys were used to getting slavery reparations. No. So now, because of these movements and these demands for basically give me my shit back, right? These white South African farmers are now claiming to being targeted and persecuted for being white. I can't even. And now the Trump administration is set to receive these refugees, and I use that term loosely because they're not refugees. You understand? So the administration is set to take them in under the claims of their being racially discriminated against and profiled, trying to paint these white South Africans as victims. Whole time, they've been benefiting from a system that they stole from by force. There's no racial discrimination here. There's no racial injustice. This is actual justice. The true owners are finally getting their land back. That's justice. And those white settlers, descendants of white settlers, should stay where they fucking are and move with the times. You're kicking our people out that literally contribute to our economy, but you want to accept these motherfuckers?
You want to talk about Freedom Day in South Africa? Let's talk about it, because what we are seeing today is not just a local debate, it's a global reckoning, a clash of narratives, of lived reality, of what it means to be free and for whom. On one hand, we have a powerful and frankly painful reflection from a white South African man stranded the line between apartheid and democracy. He's not whispering his views, he's calling it what he believes it is, a betrayal. That the promise of post-1994 South Africa of equality, unity and Ubuntu was hijacked. That corruption, violent crime, racial legislation and lack of political will have replaced freedom. His words are not soft. He says white South Africans are not free, economically captive, socially restricted, legally marginalized. He claims there are 142 laws, that's right, 142 that specifically disadvantage white South Africans when it comes to jobs, business opportunities, and upward mobility. He paints a picture of a society where, ironically, those who once had systemic privilege now feel haunted, not by violence necessarily, but by bureaucracy, exclusion, and a system that says you no longer belong at the top, and maybe not at all. He's not talking about legal for apathy, and that is important. He's talking about what he believed was the failed promise of post-apartheid South Africa, the idea that they were fighting for a free, unified society, but instead wake up in one they feel has flipped the system rather than broken it. But let's pivot because we have to. There is another side to this story. And this one is just as passionate. It says, wait a second, you are calling yourself a refugee now. This reaction, particularly loud in the US and even more so with the announcement that 49 white South Africans are being accepted as refugees into America under the Trump administration, is raising eyebrows and blood pressure. Because here's the reality. Black South Africans were disposed of land, rights and dignity for generations. Under colonial rule and apartheid, land was stolen by force. By the end of the apartheid, white South Africans, less than 10% of the population, owned over 70% of the country's land. Think about that. Generations of systemic disenfranchisement, and now as the country tries to correct that, slowly through policy like B and land reform, suddenly the ones who historically benefited are saying they are the victims. That is where this fire is coming from. That is where the outrage comes in. People are saying you can't paint yourself as the oppressed when your family tree benefited from the oppression for generations. They argue that land expropriation without compassion has controversy as it is, isn't injustice, it's reinstitution. And the US, well, critics are pointing out the painful ironing. America, which has been building walls, wrapping up deportation and even paying black and brown migrants to live, is now welcoming white South Africans with open arms on the basis of racial persecution. To many, it screams of hypocrisy, of selective compassion, of whiteness as a passport to empathy. But let's strip this down to the human level because that is where the conversation actually matters. The truth is, both realities can exist at once, and that is the uncomfortable part people don't like to admit. Yes, apartheid was an evil, violent, inhuman system that created generational trauma, theft, and inequality. That is not up for debate. The legacy of apartheid still choked black communities in South Africa in housing, education, employment, and economic opportunity. You walk through Kahi, Listetia, or Alexandra and you see it, you feel it. So when white South Africans today complain about losing privilege or being excluded from B, for many black South Africans, it doesn't read as injustice. It reads as justice delayed. But at the same time, we must also look at what kind of society is being built now. If we defy freedom only by reversing rules, by saying now is your turn to suffer, then we are not breaking circles, we are repeating them with new faces in power. Corruption is real, crime is real, state capture is real, and yes, there are white South Africans today who genuinely feel unsafe, unwelcome, and locked out of opportunities, not because of merit or qualifications, but because of the color of their skin. That is a hard truth to confront, but ignoring it doesn't make it disappear. This isn't just about politics, it's about legacy, it's about how a country heals when its foundation was built on oppression. The real question is, can a nation transform without revenge? Can justice be done without creating new forms of injustice? Because if black South Africans are still living in poverty, still excluded from land, still fighting for dignity, then the Iron Brown nation failed them. And if white South Africans, especially those who were born 1994, feel they have no future in their own country, then the system is failing them too. Freedom by definition must be shared. It cannot belong to one race or one group. If it does, it's not freedom, it's dominance in disguise. Now, as for the US accepting white South African refugees, the optics are ugly. Let's be honest, you can't push out Haitians, Salvadorans, and Mexicans often fleeing actual gang violence and political terror, and then say yes to white South Africans on claims of racial discrimination. That contradiction fuels distrust. It shows the world whose pen is validated and whose is ignored. It exposes the racism buried beneath immigration policy. But that doesn't mean those white South Africans hasn't a pen. It doesn't mean their fears hasn't real to them. The trauma of rising farm murderers, of home invasion, of feeling invisible in your own country, those are valid emotions, even if you disagree with this context. The problem is not that they are telling their story. The problem is when their story tries to erase everyone else. So here's what we need to do. We need to hold the truth at once. Truth 1. South African black majority continues to live in the economic rules of apartheid. Redress is essential. Land reform is necessary. Economic justice is overdue. Truth 2. Corruption, crime and race-based policy can and does hurt real people. And when it turns into reverse exclusion, it poisons the very freedom it's trying to deliver. We have to move beyond blame and start building something new. We cannot unlive the past. We don't have to be prisoners of it either. South Africa has the bones of greatness, but right now is at war with itself, politically, racially, economically, and the dream of freedom, of true equal freedom, is still just that, a dream. And if you are watching this from anywhere in the world, don't think this is just South Africa's problem. This is a global story of equality, of race, of land, of legacy, and of what we choose to do with history. Repeat it or rewrite it. If you have made it this far, thank you. Now is your turn to speak. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Whether you agree, disagree, or just feel conflicted, let's keep this conversation human. Let's keep it honest. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because this is where the real conversations live.